Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below with your thoughts. Today we're tackling a piece from the Wall Street Journal that has everyone buzzing
Oh, yeah.
their take on the 2024 election. You with us?
Always.
Good.
Yeah.
Because this is juicy.
What makes this deep dive especially fascinating is we're talking about the Wall Street Journal,
Right.
an institution that hasn't endorsed a presidential candidate since 1928.
Wow, yeah, that's a long time.
Yet here they are, offering a very pointed perspective on both Trump and Harris.
It's like they dropped a political bombshell, right? And the biggest shock, they argue that Trump, despite all the chaos, is too erratic to actually pull off something like a coup. It's almost like they're reassuring nervous Democrats while subtly throwing shade at Trump's temperament all at the same time.
It's a brilliant rhetorical move, really. The Journal manages to tap into the fears surrounding Trump's potential threat to democracy, acknowledge them, and then dismiss them in a way that actually highlights his unpredictability.
So that sets the stage for their whole pros and cons approach to both candidates. Like a political Tinder profile swiped left or right.
Aha, exactly.
And we saw them do the same thing with Harris in an earlier editorial.
Exactly. They're trying to present themselves as this neutral observer, offering a balanced view of each candidate's strengths and weaknesses. But here's where things get really interesting. When it comes to Trump, they actually give him credit in some pretty unexpected areas.
Right, like they straight up called his judicial appointments excellent.
Yeah.
They also highlighted his foreign policy achievements like renegotiating NAFTA.
Right.
And for those who need a reminder, those were the Abraham Accords, a series of peace agreements between Israel and several Arab countries.
Yep.
And they even praised aspects of his first-term economic policies.
And these aren't just random points they pulled out of a hat. These are strategic choices that resonate deeply with a large segment of conservative voters. They're basically saying, look, we get it. The guy can be a loose cannon, but you can't deny he delivered on some key conservative promises.
It's like they're trying to have their cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
Acknowledge the concerns about Trump, but also remind everyone why he still holds appeal for many.
And let's not forget that these positive points, while they may resonate with certain voters, are also subject to intense debate. Trump's judicial appointments, for example, have been hailed by some as a victory for conservatism, while others argue they've tipped the scales of the judiciary too far in one direction.
So even their praise for Trump is steeped in controversy. And that leads us to their criticism, because of course there's plenty of that too. They flat out say he shouldn't have been the nominee again. Criticize his lack of a clear agenda and point out how his divisive rhetoric makes any sort of unity message impossible. Talk about burying the lead.
And here's where they drop another bombshell. They suggest that Democrats are partially responsible for Trump II, claiming that their actions actually helped revive his political fortunes.
Wait, hold up. You're telling me they're blaming Democrats for Trump's comeback?
That's right. The Journal argues that Democrats' intense focus on investigations, impeachment proceedings, and what they call unprecedented prosecutions actually backfired and energized Trump's base.
It's a bold claim, to say the least. And I bet it has Democrats everywhere saying, hold on a minute, are you serious?
It's certainly a provocative argument. And whether you agree with it or not, it highlights the complexities of the current political landscape. The Journal is suggesting that Democrats, in their zeal to oppose Trump, may have inadvertently contributed to his resurgence.
This is getting really interesting. We've got the Journal praising Trump's accomplishments, criticizing his personality and lack of focus, and then throwing this curveball by blaming Democrats for his return. Where do they even go from here?
Well, they do something quite unexpected. They compare the current election to the 1980 Reagan landslide.
Wait, what? Reagan. But earlier they were talking about how people are tired of progressive governance and how Trump actually has some achievements under his belt. You'd think they'd be predicting a Republican sweep.
Right. It's a surprising turn, and it suggests that even with all of Trump's perceived strengths, the Journal still sees this as a close race.
So what's the missing piece here? What are they factoring in that we're not seeing?
That's the million-dollar question, and to get to the bottom of it, we need to keep digging. Join us in part 2 as we unpack the rest of this fascinating Wall Street Journal editorial. You know, the Journal's comparison of this election to Reagan's 1980 landslide is just begging for a closer look. It's like they're saying, hey, remember when a Republican swept into office with a clear mandate for change? This could be that, but maybe not.
Right. It's a head-scratcher.
Yeah.
They paint this picture of a public weary of progressive policies, credit Trump with certain successes, but then they pump the brakes and say it's going to be a nail-biter. Something's not adding up.
And that's the genius of their analysis.
Hmm.
They're not just throwing out hot takes, they're forcing us to grapple with the nuances of this election. They're acknowledging Trump's appeal to a segment of the electorate while simultaneously highlighting his limitations.
Yeah, it's like they're saying, yeah, he did some things right, but can he actually connect with a broad enough base to pull off another win? Jury's still out.
Precisely. And that brings us back to their criticism of Trump's lack of a clear policy agenda. They argue that in his first term, he basically rode the coattails of Paul Ryan's pre-existing conservative agenda. But now it's like he's winging it with no real vision for what he wants to achieve.
It's like they're saying, okay, Mr. Disruptor-in-Chief, we get it. You're great at shaking things up. But governing is a different beast. What's your plan?
And that raises a fascinating question for Trump supporters. Is it enough to have someone who fights the establishment even if it means sacrificing concrete policy goals? Or are they looking for a leader who can actually articulate a vision for the future?
It makes you wonder, is there a growing disillusionment with the entire political process? Like, no matter who's in charge, nothing really changes.
That's a real possibility. And it speaks to a deeper need for a conversation about what we want from our government. What are our shared values? How can we work together to create a better future? These are the big questions that often get lost in the noise of the 24-hour news cycle.
It's like we're drowning in a sea of negativity, and it's hard to see the shore.
The Journal's editorial, even with its flaws and biases, at least attempts to offer a framework for understanding this complex political moment. They present a stark choice: Trump and the tumult he represents, or the continued rise of the Democratic left.
That's where it gets interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not just the simple choice between two candidates. It's a choice between two visions for America.
Exactly. And that's why this deep dive is so important. It's not just about analyzing one editorial, it's about grappling with the fundamental questions facing our democracy. Can we bridge the divides that seem to be pulling us apart? Can we find a way to move forward together?
It's a tall order for sure. But by engaging in these kinds of conversations, by examining different perspectives, by challenging our own assumptions, we can at least start to chip away at the problem.
I completely agree. It's about fostering a sense of shared responsibility for the future of our nation. It's about recognizing that we're all in this together, even if we don't always agree on the best way forward.
Okay, so we've talked about the Journal's surprising comparison to the Reagan era, their critique of Trump's lack of a clear agenda, and the deeper questions this raises about what we as a nation want from our leaders. But their conclusion, well, that's a whole other can of worms. Let's dive into that in part 3, shall we? All right, so we're back and ready to tackle the conclusion of this Wall Street Journal editorial. And let me tell you, it's a doozy.
Yeah, no kidding. The way they frame the choice for voters is just wild. It's like they're saying, forget Trump versus Harris. It's all about two completely different Americas.
Right. The tumult of Trump, or the continued ascendancy of the Democratic left.
Yeah, those were their exact words.
Whoa, hold on. That's pretty extreme, right? It's like they're saying, pick your poison, America.
It is a very bold statement. And yeah, it's definitely meant to get a reaction out of people. They're basically saying, this is it, folks. These are your options. Make your choice.
But isn't that a little oversimplified? I mean, American politics can't just be boiled down to those two extremes, can it?
You'd think not, but the Journal insists that this election comes down to a choice between two totally opposite ways of thinking. And, you know, it's hard to disagree that politics have gotten so much more divided recently.
Yeah, it's true. It's like we're in this tug of war between two sides, and it feels like the rope's about to break.
And the Journal's conclusion. Well, it seems to say there's no easy way out of this mess. They're not saying they support either candidate, but they are saying these are the only choices we have left.
Honestly, it's a pretty depressing way to look at it. Makes you wonder if we've lost sight of something bigger, something beyond all this partisan fighting.
That's a really good point. You know, maybe the Journal's editorial, with its black and white view of the election, is actually a wake-up call. It reminds us that we need to move past this us versus them mentality and find our common ground again.
Yeah, like we need to totally reset the way we talk about politics. Step back from the edge, and remember, we're all Americans no matter who we vote for.
Exactly. And that's what this whole deep dive has been about. It's not just about picking apart this one editorial. It's about challenging ourselves to think critically about our democracy and what part we play in its future.
It's about understanding that the power to create a better future doesn't belong to one candidate or party. It's with all of us.
Well said. We all have responsibility to do the hard work of rebuilding trust, talking to each other, and remembering that we're all committed to the ideals that make our democracy strong.
So as we head into this election, let's not give in to cynicism or hopelessness. Let's engage with the issues, question our own beliefs, and look for different points of view.
Let's be informed voters, engaged citizens, and active participants in shaping the future of our country.
Because the future of our democracy really does depend on it.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And that wraps up another deep dive.
Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below sharing your thoughts on this episode. We love hearing from you. Until next time, keep diving deep and stay curious.